So I want to thank the Mantle and Contexts, because I realized I'm the only male amongst these 5 amazing females, so I like your style. So just briefly, well, I guess I can just dive right in. It's kind of implicit in it. We treat the prison as a margin, as a shadow to be ignored, as the place to be actively forgotten. Indeed, the prison is designed to be a dark place, not only architecturally, razor wire, thick walls, but geographically. Prisons are primarily located in rural areas off some forgotten highway, or they're inconspicuously nestled into some corner next to the trash. And by this I mean literally, because I teach at one of 2 prisons in New York City, in Staten Island, which is literally right between the landfill and the southernmost point of the city. But the prison is no mere margin, and we ignore it at our own peril. Rather, the prison is the primary invisible ground upon which the visible personality of society is made possible at all. That is to say, using the language of psychoanalysis, the prison is society's unconscious. It is that place where fears are suppressed, traumas are repressed, and perversions and neuroses incubate. It is that place that we cover and flee precisely because allowing it to be uncovered, to face it authentically, resolutely, would mean to face our own anxiety, our deepest fears that reveal the truth of our being. And though the unconscious is an ontological fact of the psyche, our attitude and awareness of that unconscious, the ways in which we silence it or allow it to speak, how we deal with the inevitable sublimations, all of this determines the psychic health of the whole psyche of society. And of course, here I'm using psyche in the Greek sense, not just mind, but the whole being that's irrevocably tied to the body as well. Thus, the problem of the prison cannot be addressed by mere superficial glances, reforms to make the prison more humane, programs that attempt to rehabilitate or reintegrate the inmate into society, addressing unjust or racist and classist laws, or even the interesting phenomena of the response from the recession because of economic necessities to think, well, we can't be throwing so many people into these jails. Indeed, all of these are steps in the right direction to begin the process of healing, but in the end, they're only band-aids for symptoms that cover a deep sickness at the core of society's being. These approaches are ad hoc, not only ad hoc in the sense that they are only concerned with crime after it occurs, but ad hoc in that they do not seriously look at the socio-historical conditions that produce the criminal. Crime, for the most part, is a symptom, not a cause. And in this, I'm clearly on the side of, say someone like Rousseau. If you read Hobbes or even Locke in the Second Treatise, begin with the assumption of the criminal, basing the whole social contract on the assumption of the criminal. The first paragraphs in the first chapters are about crime and the state of war, the assumed state of war. Indeed, there are truly sadistic individuals, single isolated wills to power who stand apart willfully against the larger whole, but these are rare. Those that we are so quick to label criminal, I think, and many others, are products of what I call communities of dignity that have completely competing logics with different histories, economic interest, and cultural things that are at odds with the status quo, that oftentimes overlap, but oftentimes are just very different logics unto themselves, and are many times themselves victims of the daily crimes that occur against their communities, not only daily but historical crimes. So how are they produced? Obviously for economic, social reasons, but what I focus on and what I'm trying to develop is how education produces criminals. That is, I think that we are educating education. In fact, the criminal is not the failure of education, but the criminal is the success of education. And by this I mean that we're educating radical individuals who, whether they get away with it or not, white-collar crime, are taught to act self-interestedly, immediately, without regard to consequences, by ignoring the general will or larger society as a whole. The Tea Party phenomenon, for example, is not that surprising. And so part of addressing the problem is to begin with the schools, something that's not a new thought. The school cannot be thought apart from the prison, not only in their structural similarities, a la Foucault, but in their perverse dependence upon each other. It is the prison-school dyad, I argue, that is the primary social institution upon which society lives or fails. what is this prison school dyad? The way I see it is that it is a linear relationship where, in fact, the schools produce criminals that then feed the prisons. And what I want to try to think about is, from the other end, about how possibly prisons could feed the schools by turning the relationship on its head. One explicit example, if you saw in the paper yesterday, the playground in Bed-Stuy that had the jail in it. So the preschoolers for 8 years had this jail in their playground that someone tried to paint over the word jail. In the city, we kept coming out and rewriting jail, and only till recently, yesterday, the city finally. It's interesting. They painted over it and then put like cardboard just to cover the plastic bars that they were playing on. So I take that not as just some goon not thinking through it. I think that as again, to refer to psychoanalysis, a slip, like a Freudian slip that reveals some deep truth about these deep structures that are between the prison and the school. And so I want to think about returning the relationship on its head and think about how the prisons might feed the schools and how to approach this from the other end.